Maya Williams stood in the middle of her father's auto repair shop in Detroit, Michigan. Her hands covered in black grease as she wiped them slowly with an old red cloth that had seen better days. And even though the morning sun streamed through the dusty windows creating golden beams across the concrete floor, her heart felt heavy because this shop, Williams Auto Care, had been her whole world for 15 years, since she was just 13 years old, learning every secret about engines from her father James Williams, who had passed away 6 months ago, leaving her not just heartbroken but also drowning in bills and struggling to keep the doors open. The walls were covered with faded pictures of her father standing next to classic cars he had brought back to life, and she could still hear his deep voice echoing in her mind saying, "Maya, baby girl, engines speak their own language, and you have the gift to understand them." But now those same walls seemed to mock her as she looked at the stack of overdue notices on the desk, wondering if she would have to close the only thing left of her father's legacy. It was exactly at that moment on that cold Monday morning when everything changed as 3 expensive sports cars pulled up outside, making such a loud rumbling sound that tools rattled on the workbench. And through the grimy window, she could see a silver Lamborghini, a red McLaren, and a black Bugatti that together were worth more money than her shop had made in the last 5 years. The door burst open with such force that the little bell her father had installed 20 years ago nearly fell off. And in walked Richard Brennan, a man whose face she recognized from the Detroit business magazines, a billionaire who owned half the commercial real estate in the city and was known for his collection of rare vehicles that he displayed like trophies of his wealth. Behind him walked 2 other men dressed in suits so expensive that the fabric seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights, and their polished shoes clicked against the concrete floor as they looked around the shop with expressions of disgust, like they had walked into a garbage dump instead of a place where mechanical miracles happened daily. Richard Brennan stood at 6 feet tall with silver hair slicked back perfectly and cold blue eyes that scanned the shop before settling on Maya with a look that made her skin crawl, while his companions Thomas and Derek flanked him like bodyguards, ready to protect him from the grease and grime of the working class. Richard carried something wrapped in a pristine white cloth, which he placed on Maya's workbench with the kind of care someone might use to handle a newborn baby. And when he spoke, his voice dripped with arrogance, saying, "I was told this used to be the best shop in Detroit back when James Williams was alive. But looking at this place now, I'm starting to think those were just stories old men tell." Maya felt her jaw clench at the mention of her father's name coming from this man's mouth. But she stepped forward, maintaining her composure, and asked in a steady voice, "How can I help you gentlemen today?" Which made all 3 men turn to look at her as if they had just noticed she existed. Richard's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and he looked around the shop again before asking, "Where's the real mechanic? Because I need to speak to someone who actually knows the difference between a wrench and a hairbrush," which made Thomas and Derek chuckle, like schoolboys who had just heard their favorite joke. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the anger rise in her chest like fire, but she kept her voice calm and professional as she said, "I'm Maya Williams, the head mechanic and owner of this shop. So whatever you need fixed, you're talking to the right." The laughter that erupted from the 3 men filled the shop with such cruel mockery that even the old clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. And Richard stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, mixing with the familiar scent of motor oil that permanently lived in her shop. "You expect me to believe that a woman, a black woman at that, can fix something that 10 of the best mechanics in the country couldn't even diagnose?" Richard said, his voice rising with each word, while Thomas added, "Richard, let's get out of here because this is obviously a waste of time, since she probably learned everything she knows from YouTube videos." But Maya didn't back down. Instead, she walked straight to the covered item on her workbench and pulled off the white cloth in one smooth motion, revealing what lay beneath. And even though she had worked on thousands of engine parts in her life, what she saw made her catch her breath. It was a damaged, vintage Ferrari engine component, specifically from a 1962 Ferrari 250 GO, one of only 36 ever made. And she recognized it immediately, because her father had shown her pictures of this exact part in his old Italian automotive books, teaching her that this single component was worth more than most people's houses. Richard noticed the recognition in her eyes, and his smile turned predatory like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water as he said, "So you do know what this is, which means you also know that without this part working perfectly, my car is just a very expensive paperweight sitting in my garage." Maya ran her fingers along the damaged component, feeling the microscopic imperfections that told the story of catastrophic engine failure. And she could tell this wasn't just normal wear and tear, but something much more complex that would require Not just skill, but an almost supernatural understanding of vintage Ferrari engineering. 10 mechanics have tried and failed, Richard continued, pulling out a piece of paper from his jacket pocket, including specialists from Italy who flew here just to look at it. And they all said the same thing, that it's impossible to repair, and I need to find an original replacement which could take years and cost a fortune. Derek stepped forward laughing and said, Richard, why are we even wasting time here, when you can see she's just some grease monkey playing dress-up in her daddy's old shop? And those words hit Maya like a physical blow, but instead of showing pain, she let them fuel her determination. She looked Richard straight in the eyes, not backing down even though he towered over her, and said with a voice steady as steel, if you think it's impossible, then why did you come here? And Richard's smile grew even wider as he unfolded the paper, revealing it was a contract. Because I enjoy watching people fail when they think they're better than they are, he said. So here's my offer, and listen carefully, because I won't repeat it. If you can fix this impossible component in 1 week, I'll pay you $100,000 cash. Enough to save this pathetic shop, and probably change your little life forever. The shop fell silent, except for the distant sound of traffic outside and the humming of the old refrigerator in the corner where Maya kept her lunch. And she knew this was more than just a challenge about fixing an engine part. This was about everything her father had taught her, everything she had worked for, and everything she believed about herself. But, Richard continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper that somehow seemed louder than shouting, when you fail, and you will fail, you'll admit publicly that you're not a real mechanic. You'll close this shop permanently, and you'll stop pretending to be something you're not. Thomas pulled out his phone, ready to record whatever happened next, while Derek counted imaginary money in the air mockingly. And Maya felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders like the entire building had suddenly landed on her back. She thought about her mother, Patricia, who had been worried sick about her trying to keep the shop running. About the neighborhood kids who came by to learn about cars. About Mrs. Johnson next door, who always brought her sweet potato pie and called her father's shop the heart of the community. And about her father who had believed in her when no one else would. Maya picked up the damaged component, feeling its weight in her hands. And she could almost hear her father's voice whispering, they'll doubt you because you're different, baby girl, but you let your work speak louder than their prejudice. And, with those words echoing in her mind, she made her decision. I accept your challenge, she said, her voice ringing clear through the shop. But when I fix this component, and I will fix it, you'll not only pay the $100,000, but you'll also apologize for your disrespect, not just to me, but to every woman and every black person you've ever dismissed because of your ignorance. Richard's laughter boomed through the shop as he slapped the contract on the workbench and pulled out a gold-plated pen that probably cost more than Maya made in a month, saying, you've got yourself a deal, little lady, and I'm going to enjoy watching you crumble under the pressure. Maya read through the contract carefully, noting every clause and condition, seeing that Richard had made sure to include penalties if she backed out and clauses that would give him ownership of the shop's location if she failed, making her realize this wasn't just a bet but a calculated attack on her father's legacy. With a steady hand that betrayed none of the storm raging inside her, Maya signed her name on the contract, the pen scratching against the paper sounding like thunder in the quiet shop. And as she handed it back to Richard, she noticed Thomas, already typing on his phone, probably spreading the word about the impossible bet the foolish woman mechanic had just accepted. Richard folded the contract and put it in his jacket pocket, with the satisfaction of a predator who had just cornered. The first 3 days blurred together like a fever dream as Maya worked 18 hours straight without stopping, except for quick bathroom breaks and gulps of cold coffee that tasted like motor oil, her eyes burning from staring at the damaged Ferrari component under the bright magnifying lamp, while her back screamed in protest from being hunched over the workbench where she had spread out every manual, every diagram, and every note her father had ever written about vintage Italian engines. She had called 17 different mechanics across the country, some who had worked with her father, and remembered the little girl who used to hand him tools. But when she described the damage to the component, each one went silent before telling her it was impossible, that metal stressed to that degree couldn't be restored, that she should give up before she hurt herself trying. Her best friend Jessica Chen arrived on Tuesday night after her 12-hour shift at Detroit General Hospital, still wearing her nurse scrubs, stained with coffee, and carrying Chinese takeout that had gone cold. And she found Maya surrounded by metal shavings and failed attempts. Her usually neat braided hair, now wild, and her brown eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and concentration. Maya, honey, you're killing yourself over this, Jessica said softly, setting down the food and putting her arm around Maya's shaking shoulders. And for what? To prove something to a man who wouldn't spit on you if you were on fire. Maya pushed the component away and buried her face in her hands, feeling the weight of 3 days without proper sleep. And she whispered, "It's not about him, Jess. It's about every time someone told me I didn't belong in this shop. Every time a customer asked to speak to a real mechanic when they saw me. Every time someone assumed I was the secretary instead of the owner." The shop felt smaller at night with just the two of them there, the fluorescent lights creating harsh shadows that made the tools on the wall look like weapons. And Jessica noticed Maya's hands were trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the pressure of knowing that in 4 days, she would either be victorious or would lose everything her father had built. On Wednesday afternoon, day 4 of the challenge, Maya was using her father's old Italian automotive dictionary, trying to decode a technical specification, when the bell above the door chimed, and in walked a young man in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that somehow didn't look out of place among the grease and grime. His warm brown skin glowing under the shop lights, and his dark eyes showing genuine concern, rather than mockery. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt," he said in a voice that was educated, but not condescending. "But my BMW just died 2 blocks away, and the tow truck driver said this was the closest shop. Though I can see you're in the middle of something important." Maya looked up from the component, her vision blurry from focusing so intensely, and she saw something in his face that she hadn't seen from a customer in days, which was respect. And even though she needed every minute to work on the Ferrari part, something made her stand up and say, "I can't take a quick look because nobody should be stranded in this neighborhood with a dead car." The man introduced himself as Marcus Thompson, an attorney who had just moved to Detroit from Chicago to work at a firm downtown. And as Maya grabbed her portable diagnostic tool, she noticed he was looking at the Ferrari component with recognition in his eyes. Within 30 minutes, she had diagnosed his BMW's problem as a failed alternator, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, even though her mind kept drifting back to the impossible challenge waiting on her workbench. And as she worked, Marcus asked, "That component on your bench, is that from a 250 GTO? Which made Maya stop and look at him with surprise. "My grandfather was a collector," Marcus explained. "And he used to say that Ferrari component was like the heart of Mona Lisa, priceless and irreplaceable. So what's it doing in your shop?" Maya found herself telling him everything, about Richard's challenge, about the bet, about the contract that would destroy her father's legacy if she failed. And as she spoke, Marcus's expression grew darker, like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. "Richard Brennan," Marcus said slowly, his jaw tightening. "He's actually a client at my firm. Or rather, his company is. And I've heard stories about him that would make your skin crawl. About how he destroys small businesses for sport. How he makes these impossible bets with people who can't afford to lose." Maya's heart sank even further, but then Marcus said something that sparked a tiny flame of hope as he pulled out his business card and pressed it into her grease-stained hand. "Listen, if you need anything, legal advice about that contract, someone to witness what happens, or just someone who believes you can do this, call me anytime, day or night." After Marcus left with his BMW, purring like new, Maya returned to the component with renewed determination. And it was then, late on Wednesday night as the city slept around her, that she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Using her father's old microscope that he had bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, she found microscopic metal shavings embedded throughout the component. Shavings that didn't match the Ferrari's original metal composition. Shavings that had been deliberately added to ensure that even if someone managed to repair the visible damage, the component would destroy any engine it was installed in. This wasn't just a damaged part. This was sabotage. And Richard hadn't just brought her an impossible challenge. He had brought her a trap designed to humiliate her, even if she somehow succeeded in the repair. And the realization hit her like a punch to the stomach, making her stagger back from the workbench. She called Marcus immediately, even though it was past midnight, and his voice was alert when he answered like he had been waiting for her call. And when she explained what she had found, he said, "Document everything. Take pictures, save samples of those shavings, because this changes everything from a bet to potential fraud." Thursday morning arrived with Maya having not slept at all. Her mother Patricia arriving at the shop with homemade breakfast and fresh clothes, taking one look at her daughter and saying, "Baby, you look like death warmed over. And your father wouldn't want you destroying yourself like this." Maya hugged her mother, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume, mixed with the butter from the biscuits she had brought. And she whispered, "Mama, They tried to set me up. They sabotaged the part to make sure I'd fail. And Patricia's eyes flashed with the same fire that had made her march for civil rights in the 60s. Then you show them what Williams women are made of, Patricia said firmly. Because we don't break, we don't bend. And we sure as hell don't let nobody make fools of us. That evening, as Maya was carefully extracting each microscopic metal, shaving with tools so precise they could remove a splinter from a butterfly's wing, an elderly man entered the shop, moving slowly but with purpose, his weathered face showing decades of experience, and his thick Italian accent filling the space as he said, "Scusi, you are the Maya Williams who posted on the Ferrari restoration forum about the impossible 250 GTO component." The man introduced himself as Giuseppe Moretti, 78 years old, who had worked at the Ferrari factory in Maranello for 40 years, and had actually helped design the very component sitting on Maya's workbench, and his eyes filled with tears as he examined her work, saying, "Dio mio, you found the sabotage that even trained eyes would miss. You have the gift, young lady, the same gift I saw in only 3 people in my entire career." Giuseppe spent the next 3 hours teaching Maya secrets that weren't in any manual, techniques passed down through generations of Ferrari craftsmen, showing her how to use sound and touch to understand the metals, stress points, how to read the component like a map of its history, and most importantly, how to rebuild it not just to factory specifications but to exceed them. "Why are you helping me?" Maya asked as Giuseppe prepared to leave. And the old man smiled sadly, saying, "Because I have a granddaughter in Italy who dreams of being an engineer. And every day someone tells her it's not for girls. So I help you to show her that talent has no gender, no color, only passion and skill." As Thursday turned to Friday, with only 2 days left, Marcus arrived at the shop with security cameras he had purchased, saying, "If they sabotage the part, they might try to sabotage your work too. So we're going to document everything and protect what you've built." And as they installed the cameras together, Maya felt something she hadn't felt since her father died, which was that she wasn't alone in this fight. The security cameras Marcus had installed proved their worth at 3 o'clock Friday morning when they captured crystal-clear footage of Thomas, Richard's associate, using a crowbar to try to break into the shop through the back door, his face clearly visible in the infrared light as he struggled with the reinforced locks Maya's father had installed years ago after a previous break-in attempt. And the alarm Maya had activated sent alerts to her phone, Marcus's phone, and the police. Simultaneously, Maya watched the footage from her apartment, where Marcus had insisted she go to get at least a few hours of sleep. And she felt a mixture of rage and satisfaction, knowing that she now had proof of their attempts to ensure her failure. While Marcus was already on the phone with his law partner discussing potential criminal charges that could be filed against Richard and his associates. When the police arrived, Thomas had already fled. But the footage was saved in multiple locations, including Marcus's firm's cloud server. An officer, Janet Rodriguez, who had known Maya's father, said, "We'll put extra patrols around here for the next few days because nobody messes with the Williams family on my watch." Friday morning came with unexpected support, as word had spread through the neighborhood about Maya's challenge. And Mrs. Johnson from next door brought her famous sweet potato pie, along with her grandson Deshaun, who was studying mechanical engineering at Wayne State University. And he looked at Maya with awe, saying, "Miss Maya, you're trending on social media. Everyone's calling you the woman who's standing up to the billionaire bully." The local news had indeed picked up the story after someone, probably Thomas or Derek, had leaked it thinking public humiliation would add to Maya's pressure. But instead it had backfired, as people rallied around the young black woman mechanic, taking on impossible odds, and by noon, there were dozens of supporters gathered outside the shop holding signs that said, "We believe in Maya," and "Black Girl Magic in Motor City." Giuseppe returned Friday afternoon, with his granddaughter Sofia, on video call from Italy. A bright-eyed 16-year-old, who spoke perfect English, and watched with fascination as Maya worked on the component, asking questions that showed she had inherited her grandfather's mechanical genius. And when Maya successfully removed the last of the sabotage shavings, Sofia cheered so loud it echoed through the shop, making everyone smile, despite the tension. "Now comes the real challenge," Giuseppe said, his weathered hands guiding Maya's as she began the delicate process of rebuilding the component. Using a combination of traditional techniques and innovative approaches her father had developed. "You must not just fix, you must transform. You must make this piece sing like Pavarotti." The process required heating the metal to exact temperatures, using tools some of which Giuseppe had brought from his personal collection that had been passed down through 3 generations of Ferrari craftsmen. and Maya's hands moved with a precision that made Marcus, who was watching while supposedly working on his laptop, whisper it's like watching an artist paint a masterpiece. As Friday night turned into Saturday morning, with less than 24 hours remaining, Maya discovered something extraordinary. While applying one of her father's techniques that involved using sound waves to detect stress fractures in metal, she realized that by combining this with Giuseppe's old-world methods, she could actually restructure the component at a molecular level, making it stronger than the original factory specifications. Jessica arrived with medical supplies because Maya had cut her hand on a sharp edge, and as she bandaged the wound, she said the whole hospital is talking about you. Even the chief of surgery, who drives a Ferrari, asked if you could look at his car when this is over, and Maya laughed for the first time in days. The sound mixing, with the jazz music Marcus had put on, to help everyone stay calm. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on Saturday, when Maya, following a sudden inspiration that felt like her father's spirit guiding her hands, used a technique she had invented on the spot. Combining ultrasonic cleaning with a chemical treatment Giuseppe suggested and a polishing method she had learned from restoring her father's old Mustang. And suddenly the component didn't just look repaired, it looked reborn, gleaming with a perfection that made Giuseppe cry actual tears. In 40 years at Ferrari, Giuseppe said, his voice thick with emotion, I never seen anything like this. You didn't just fix it, you evolved it. You created something that will make engineers study for years to understand how you did it. And he immediately called his former colleagues in Italy, speaking rapid Italian that Maya couldn't understand, but she could hear the excitement in his voice. Marcus had been researching Richard's past and discovered something crucial, showing Maya documents on his laptop that revealed Richard had made similar bets with 5 other mechanics over the past 3 years. All minorities, all women, all had failed under suspicious circumstances. And 2 had later testified in sealed depositions that they suspected sabotage but couldn't prove it. And now, with the security footage and the evidence of the metal shavings, they had enough to expose his pattern of predatory behavior. We're not just fighting for your shop, Marcus said, his hand briefly touching Maya's shoulder in a gesture of support that sent unexpected warmth through her exhausted body. We're fighting for everyone he's destroyed, and everyone he planned to destroy after you. Saturday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor in the form of Anthony Rossi, a legendary Ferrari collector from California, who Giuseppe had called, and he had flown in specifically to witness what Maya had accomplished, bringing with him a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO on a covered trailer, saying, if you've really done what Giuseppe says, I want my car to be the one that proves it to the world. The component was finished by Saturday evening, 6.5 days after Richard had issued his challenge, and as Maya held it up to the light, it caught the sunset streaming through the windows and seemed to glow with an inner fire that matched the determination burning in her chest. While outside, the crowd had grown to over 100 people, including reporters from major automotive magazines, who had heard about the story through social media. Jessica set up a live stream on her phone, saying the whole world needs to see this. And within minutes, thousands of people were watching as Maya prepared for the final test, installing the component into Anthony Rossi's Ferrari with movements so graceful and confident that even skeptics in the comments were converted to believers. And when she turned the key for the initial test, the engine purred with a sound so perfect that Anthony actually gasped and said that's better than when it left the factory in 1962. Marcus had arranged for 3 independent Ferrari experts to examine the component and verify its authenticity and function. And all 3 were stunned by what Maya had achieved, with one saying directly to the camera, this isn't just a repair, this is an innovation that Ferrari themselves should study. And their testimony would be crucial evidence if Richard tried to claim the work was somehow fraudulent. As Saturday night arrived with the challenge set to conclude Sunday morning, Maya stood in her shop surrounded by friends and supporters, her mother holding her hand, Jessica managing the growing media attention, Marcus preparing legal documents, and Giuseppe teaching Sophia via video call about what her Aunt Maya had accomplished. And for the first time since her father had died, Maya felt his presence, not as a weight of expectation, but as wings lifting her up. The shop that had felt like a tomb 6 days ago, now thrummed with life and energy. The walls covered with encouraging messages people had posted. The workbench that had been her battlefield, now looking like an altar to determination and skill. And as Maya looked at the component one more time before securing it in a locked safe Marcus had brought, she whispered, Daddy, I didn't just fix it, I made it better, just like you taught me. And somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Sunday morning arrived with a crowd of over 200 people packed outside Williams Auto Care, the street blocked off by police, who were officially there for traffic control, but Officer Rodriguez had whispered to Maya that they were also there to make sure Richard played fair, and the morning sun cast long shadows as 3 luxury cars approached with engines roaring like angry beasts, announcing the arrival of the man who thought he was coming to claim victory. Richard Brennan stepped out of his silver Lamborghini, wearing a $10,000 suit and sunglasses that he removed slowly for dramatic effect. His smile so confident, it looked painted on his face, while Thomas and Derek emerged from their cars looking less certain, especially Thomas, whose failed break-in attempt was now documented evidence that Marcus had already shared with the district attorney's office. The crowd parted as Richard walked toward the shop, but instead of the fear or respect he was used to commanding, he was met with stony silence and hard stares from people who knew exactly what kind of man he was, and several held up their phones, recording every second while a news van from Channel 7 positioned itself for the best angle of what reporter. Sarah Martinez was calling David versus Goliath in the Motor City. Richard pushed through the shop door with his usual arrogance, but his confident stride faltered for just a moment when he saw not just Maya, but also Marcus in his sharp suit, holding legal documents. Giuseppe, whose reputation in the Ferrari world was legendary. Anthony Rossi, whose car collection was worth more than Richard's entire portfolio. And 3 certified Ferrari experts, who had been flown in from different parts of the country to witness and verify the results. "Well, little mechanic," Richard announced loudly enough for the crowd outside to hear through the open door. "Time's up, and I'm here to collect my winnings. So why don't you admit defeat now and save yourself further embarrassment? Because we both know you couldn't possibly have fixed that component." Maya stepped forward, her freshly braided hair gleaming under the lights, wearing her father's old work shirt with Williams embroidered on the pocket, and she held her head high as she spoke with a voice clear and strong. "Mr. Brennan, I have something to show everyone before we discuss the component." And she nodded to Marcus, who connected his laptop to a large TV screen that Jessica had helped set up. The security footage began playing, showing Thomas trying to break into the shop, his face clearly visible as he worked the crowbar against the door. And the crowd gasped, while Richard's face went from confident to pale in seconds, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as Thomas stepped back, trying to disappear into the wall behind him. "That's not all," Maya continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "When I examined your component, I found evidence of deliberate sabotage. Metal shavings that don't match the original Ferrari composition were embedded throughout the piece, shavings that would have destroyed any engine even if the component was perfectly repaired." And she held up the evidence bags that had been officially documented and notarized by Marcus's law firm. Richard tried to interrupt, his voice cracking as he said, "That proves nothing. You probably added those shavings yourself to cover for your failure." But Giuseppe stepped forward, his aged voice carrying the weight of decades of expertise. "I examined those shavings myself. They have oxidation patterns showing they were embedded weeks ago, long before Miss Williams received the component, and I will testify to this in any court." The crowd outside pressed closer to the windows, some standing on boxes to see better, as Maya walked to the safe and retrieved the restored component, holding it up so the morning light caught its perfect surface. And even from where he stood, Richard could see it wasn't just repaired, but transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a museum of mechanical art. "You wanted me to fix your impossible component," Maya said, moving toward Anthony Rossi's Ferrari that had been positioned in the center of the shop. "But I did more than fix it. I improved it, and now we're going to prove it works better than the original factory specifications." And she began installing the component with movements so precise and confident that even Derek, despite his loyalty to Richard, found himself mesmerized by her skill. The shop fell silent, except for the soft clicking of Maya's tools and the occasional whisper from the crowd outside. And when she finished the installation, she stood back and looked directly at Richard, saying, "Mr. Rossi, would you do the honors of starting your $30 million car with my rebuilt component?" And Anthony nodded, sliding into the driver's seat of the gorgeous red Ferrari that looked like it had driven straight out of everyone's dreams. The key turned, and for a heartbeat nothing happened, making Richard start to smile. But then the engine roared to life with a sound so pure, so perfect, that it was like hearing angels sing, if angels sang in Italian, and ran on high-octane fuel. And the 3 Ferrari experts immediately rushed forward with their diagnostic equipment, their faces showing amazement as they read the results. "This is unprecedented," announced Dr. James Morrison, the lead expert who had written 5 books on Ferrari engines. "The component is performing 18% better than factory specifications." with harmonics that suggest it will actually improve the engine's longevity rather than stress it. And he turned to face the camera, saying, "In my 30 years of studying Ferrari engineering, I have never seen a repair that actually enhanced the original design." Richard's legs seemed to give out as he slumped against the wall, his perfect suit wrinkling as sweat beaded on his forehead. While Thomas was already backing toward the door, only to find Officer Rodriguez standing there with a polite but firm smile. And Derek pulled out his phone, presumably to call Richard's lawyer, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it on the concrete floor, where it shattered like Richard's confidence. Maya pulled out the contract, the same one Richard had made her sign 7 days ago, and she read aloud the clause Richard himself had written. Upon successful repair of the component, payment of $100,000 is due immediately, along with a public apology for any disrespect shown. And she looked up at him with eyes that held no mercy, only justice. "I believe you owe me something, Mr. Brennan." The crowd outside erupted in cheers that shook the windows, chanting "Maya, Maya, Maya," while Richard fumbled for his checkbook, his hands trembling as he wrote the check. And when he handed it to her, Maya noticed he couldn't meet her eyes, the predator finally understanding what it felt like to be prey. "The apology," Maya said firmly. "And not just to me, but to everyone you've disrespected and destroyed with these predatory bets." And when Richard mumbled something inaudible, Marcus stepped forward with his phone recording and said louder, "Mr. Brennan, the people outside and the viewers online need to hear your words clearly." Richard's apology came out strangled and bitter, but under the watchful eyes of the Ferrari experts, the police, and hundreds of witnesses, both present and online, he admitted to his disrespect, his prejudice, and his attempts to destroy small businesses owned by minorities and women. And with each word, Maya felt the ghost of her father standing beside her, proud and strong. As Richard turned to leave, Anthony Rossi announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Miss Williams, I want you to service all 5 of my Ferraris, and I'll be recommending you to every collector I know," which was followed by Dr. Morrison, adding, "Ferrari should hire you as a consultant, because what you've achieved here will be studied in automotive engineering programs." And suddenly, Maya was surrounded by people shaking her hand, hugging her, and asking for her business card. The moment of truth had arrived and passed like a thunderstorm that clears the air and leaves everything fresh and new. And as Maya stood in her father's shop, holding the check that would save it, surrounded by a community that had rallied behind her, with Marcus's proud smile warming her more than the morning sun, and Giuseppe openly weeping while telling Sophia on video call that she had just witnessed history, Maya knew that she hadn't just won a bet, she had shattered a ceiling that had been built to keep people like her down. And the sound of those shattered pieces hitting the ground was sweeter than any engine's roar. The video of Richard's humiliation went viral within hours, reaching 10 million views by Monday morning, with the hashtag Maya fixed it trending worldwide. And news outlets from CNN to the BBC picked up the story of the young black woman mechanic who had not only defeated a billionaire bully, but had revolutionized Ferrari engine repair in the process, making Maya's phone ring so constantly that Jessica had to take over as her unofficial media manager. Within a week of her victory, Williams Auto Care was booked solid for 6 months, with exotic car owners from across the country shipping their vehicles to Detroit just to have Maya work on them, and she had to turn down 3 job offers from Ferrari themselves, though she did agree to consult for them on a special project involving vintage restorations. Maya used part of the $100,000 to hire 5 new mechanics, deliberately choosing talented people who had been overlooked by other shops, including Maria, a Puerto Rican woman who had been told she was too small to work on cars; James, a black veteran who had been rejected by multiple shops despite his military training in aviation mechanics; and Lynn, an Asian woman whose engineering degree had been dismissed by employers who assumed she couldn't handle practical work. The shop that had once been on the verge of closing was transformed into a training ground for the next generation, with Maya establishing the James Williams Memorial Scholarship in honor of her father, providing free apprenticeships to young people from underprivileged backgrounds who showed passion for automotive work, regardless of their gender or race. Marcus had become more than just her legal advisor, visiting the shop every day with coffee and conversation that gradually shifted from professional to personal. And one evening, 3 weeks after the challenge, as they worked together organizing paperwork for the shop's expansion, he finally asked Maya, "Would you like to have dinner with me somewhere that doesn't involve motor oil and engine parts?" And her yes came with a smile that lit up the entire shop. Richard Brennan's empire began crumbling after the video exposed his predatory practices, with investigations revealing years of fraudulent business dealings. And within 3 months, he had fled Detroit, facing multiple lawsuits from the small business owners he had destroyed. His fancy cars seized by the government. His reputation so thoroughly destroyed that even his former associates, Thomas and Derek, publicly distanced themselves from him. Giuseppe became a regular fixture at the shop, flying in from Italy every few months to teach advanced techniques to Maya's apprentices. And his granddaughter Sophia was accepted into MIT's engineering program with a recommendation letter from Maya that the admissions board later said was one of the most powerful they had ever read, describing how talent and determination could overcome any barrier. 6 months after the challenge, Maya stood in her expanded shop, which now occupied 3 storefronts on the block, watching her diverse team of 15 mechanics working on everything from classic Mustangs to modern Lamborghinis. And Mrs. Johnson from next door still brought sweet potato pie every Friday, but now she brought enough for the whole crew. The transformation was remarkable with new equipment, a comfortable waiting area that Jessica had designed with automotive history books and fresh coffee always brewing, and a wall of fame featuring photos of all the cars they had restored, along with a central portrait of James Williams with the quote, "Let your work speak louder than their prejudice," that had become the shop's motto. Marcus had officially become Maya's boyfriend and business partner, handling the legal side of the growing enterprise, while she focused on the mechanical miracles. And together they had launched an initiative to help other minority-owned automotive businesses get established, providing both funding and mentorship to those who had been denied opportunities elsewhere. 1 year after defeating Richard, Maya received an invitation to speak at the National Automotive Excellence Awards. And as she stood at the podium in a dress her mother had picked out but with her father's work boots hidden underneath, because some things never change, she looked out at an audience of industry leaders who at once would have dismissed her without a second thought. "They mocked me for being different," Maya said, her voice carrying through the auditorium with the same strength she had shown in her shop. "But our differences are not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths to be celebrated. And every person who has been told they don't belong. Every young girl who loves cars but is given dolls instead of tools. Every minority kid who dreams of engineering but is steered toward more appropriate careers. I'm here to tell you that you do belong." The standing ovation lasted 12 minutes. But Maya was already thinking about Monday morning, when a new group of apprentices would start at her shop. Kids from every background imaginable, including a young black girl named Destiny, who had written her a letter saying, "Miss Maya, I want to be just like you. Someone who fixes more than just engines, but fixes the world's broken ideas about who can be what." 5 years later, Williams Auto Care had become Williams Automotive Institute, with locations in 5 cities, each one run by someone Maya had trained. And the original shop in Detroit remained the heart of the operation, where Maya still worked on special projects, her hands still covered in grease, her spirit still unbreakable. Marcus had proposed to her in the shop right next to the workbench where she had signed Richard's contract, saying, "This is where I saw you change the world, and I want to spend my life watching you continue to do it." And their wedding was held in the expanded shop, with Giuseppe officiating, Jessica as maid of honor, and every mechanic Maya had trained forming an honor guard with raised wrenches. The little girl who had learned at her father's knee had become a legend in the automotive world, featured on magazine covers and documentary films. But she still arrived at the shop every morning at 6, still made time to teach anyone who wanted to learn, and still believed that the best response to prejudice was excellence that couldn't be denied. Richard Brennan became a cautionary tale told in business schools about the danger of underestimating people based on prejudice, while Maya Williams became the example of what happened when talent met opportunity, and refused to be diminished by anyone's narrow vision of what was possible. On quiet evenings when the shop was empty, except for the ghosts of all the dreams that had been rebuilt there, Maya would stand in the same spot where she had accepted Richard's challenge and whisper, "Thank you, Daddy," knowing that James Williams's legacy lived on not just in the shop that bore his name, but in every engine that roared to life, under hands that others had said weren't meant to hold tools. The engine of change that Maya had started would never stop running, powered by the fuel of determination and maintained by the mechanics of justice. And as she looked at the latest batch of applications for the apprentice program, seeing names from every corner of the world and every walk of life, she knew that her victory hadn't been just personal, but universal. A triumph that echoed in every garage and workshop where someone was told they could be more than what the world expected them to be.